Streaming live via the internet. Welcome to ISP Radio, your weekly source for ISP-related news, events, and interviews with industry experts. If you deliver internet via fiber optic, wireless, coax, or any other way, you're in the right place. Chat live with us weekly via ispradio.com every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time. And now a brief word from our sponsors. Link Technologies, providing ISP consulting, support, and hardware for wireless ISPs. TowerCoverage.com, providing online RF coverage maps.
Welcome to another edition of ISP Radio. I'm your host, Steve Graybiel, broadcasting from my office in Moriarty, New Mexico, and we've got Dennis Burgess, the producer of the show and co-host of the show, broadcasting from St. Louis, Missouri. So, Dennis, you out there?
I am here.
What's going on in your neck of the woods?
Well, I'll tell you what. We've been busy with plenty of cutovers, plenty of network upgrades, lots of BGP. You know, people are getting their budgets. We're just keeping busy, and that's always a really, really good thing. I have a little story. I was telling you guys about this before. One of our customers decided that they were going to upgrade a whole bunch of the NVRs, the DVR systems, and these were all the Ubiquiti Unify ones. And they decided to upgrade them overnight. So they went out there and basically did the in-place. They just connected remotely into them, said upgrade. They didn't even think too much of it. Now, it takes a minute because it actually has to sit there and process all the files and all that kind of stuff. So it took him a little bit to let it run. So he just went to bed, didn't think anything of it. And then in the morning, he gets up and all is good. And he logs in, and there's no cameras whatsoever. So, in all these systems. So what he found out was, and we looked at it for him, is he decided to upgrade to the 3.2 version of the Ubiquiti Unify video software. That software, and it specifically says in the upgrade feature set, the feature, not a bug version, that any Gen 1 cameras are not supported anymore. So all of his clients had Gen 1 cameras, the original Unify cameras. So the end result here was, guess what? He had no cameras, and he had to do a full uninstall. He actually had to delete everything, all of his cameras, all of his software, all of his videos that he had. All that had to be removed so that he could sit there and reinstall the application. So, you know, hindsight is what it is. Just make sure you read the release notes before you add, you know, various items to your network, if that makes sense to you. So, yeah, it was kind of a busy morning for him to try to get all those camera systems back up before the entire day started. So, but there you go. I mean, that's you know, some of the stuff that we have to deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, life as an ISP, huh?
Yep, exactly.
Especially if you want to add that product line and specialty to your list of things you already do.
Yeah, you just need to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row and that you know about it. And I'm guarantee you that he knows about it now, so it ain't going to be an issue anymore.
Right now, we all know about it.
Yeah, but I just wanted to make sure I told everybody here because, you know, it does seem kind of counterintuitive that they would give you that version of software, if that makes sense, or allow you to have that, but yet not support their older cameras. I don't know. It just seems kind of weird that they don't support their older cameras, period, in the new version of software. Really odd to do that, but you know, I'm not Ubiquiti, so I can't sit there and tell them what they should or shouldn't do, obviously. Mm-hmm. So.
Right. Well, you've been busy helping people and, like you said, doing upgrades and the like. Out here, it's kind of nice and quiet since we did that upgrade to 5 gig in many areas. Things have really quieted down. The phones don't ring hardly anymore. I like that. But just a matter of churning back in all the profits back into the technology. So to me, it's like a no-win battle. Can barely make a profit out of this because you got to churn it in because, like computers, everything changes in 18 months, and these devices are all gobbling bandwidth. I've even heard of toasters and refrigerators that are IP enabled.
Oh yeah. You mean everything's gonna be IP enabled? You know, I'm gonna go back to another little program. I don't know if anybody's ever played with these things, but the little Amazon Echo boxes. Have you seen those yet? Steve?
Yeah, on TV.
Yeah. So they have those boxes, and what they do is they have a nifty little system where you can sit there and say, "Hey, add this to my grocery list," and that kind of stuff. And it's really cool stuff for all practical purposes. But I can the software is really, really good, and I can really see that as they come about. I'm waiting for them to put the proverbial double gang enclosure. So you know how you have your light switch. I'm waiting for them to have another little box right next to it whenever you build your new home, and it will have a Echo box that is network connected in every room, because that's exactly what this is going. Remember Iron Man? You look at what's his name? Not Jeeves. What the heck's that guy's name? Come on, help me out here.
I can't think of it.
Yeah, the guy that runs the house. Jarvis. That's his name. Okay. That is exactly what one of these Amazon Echoes. If you put a networked version of that inside every home, guess what? That's exactly what you're going to get eventually. So, eventually everything's going to be network connected, and it is what it is, and we're just going to have to keep providing bandwidth for that, man.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
well, today we have on our show, he's no stranger to the show. He's been on the show before. Today we have Patrick Leary. He's the president of the North American business Leary-Baicells. And Patrick, are you there?
I am.
So, Patrick, tell us about your transition from where you were to where you are now, and tell us about Baicells, where they were and where they're at and where they're going.
Sure. Good morning, Steve and Dennis. Glad to be here. I appreciate it. And good morning to the audience. I could probably take up the whole segment just talking about this part, but it's an interesting organization, and I've joined them officially on the 15th of February. So we're barely a month and a half in. It's been crazy, incredibly hectic, but very proud of what we've accomplished so far. We've already taken in some pretty substantial orders, and we've been busy laying literally the infrastructure for the business, because we started here at ground zero. So I was brought in to lead the North American entry of the company into U.S. and Canada. And they had made some earlier kind of efforts, like as I mentioned, dipping their toes in with an organization up in Wisconsin called FISI, which some of your listeners might be a little familiar with. But that organization rolls up into the parent here, and then Jesse Raish, who was running that, has become our VP of Engineering and Operations. But Baicells is very, very interesting. So I thought very long and hard about making this decision, because I was quite happy where I was. I wasn't looking. We were doing extraordinarily well at our other place, and all signs continued to look good. In spite of some of the hurdles, they were climbing over those hurdles steadily, if not as fast as everyone would like, but that's just the nature of the beast. So what first got me interested was when I saw these guys appear at a WISP show one day, and I thought, who are these guys? Because it was interesting to me, because they knew enough to be there. They knew enough to be there and not at a telco event or a cable event or a major carrier event. They were at WISPA for their first North American little test. So that told me someone there was kind of clued in and had an idea of really what the market looked like, at least from the entry standpoint. So Baicells, the chairman of this particular company, is a guy named Sun Li-Xin, and in Chinese you put your first name at the end, so technically I guess his first name would be Li-Xin, but it's spelled L-I-X-N. First time I did a call with him, by the way, it was kind of funny, because I'm usually clued into pronunciations and everything, but I really wasn't thinking, and I called him Lixon, and it was a video chat, and on an application that they all use over there called WeChat. So I'm calling him Lixon, and he's laughing his ass off of, excuse me for the language, he's laughing very hard on the call, and I'm thinking, boy, he's a really cheerful guy, he's just nervous laughter. I'm not sure what it was, but the truth was he was laughing at my mispronunciation and butchering of his name, and didn't want to offend me by correcting me on the spot, and so I had to learn that myself. But in any event, he's still a pretty young man. He's in his mid to late 40s. he was one of the 12 guys, top 12 guys at Huawei, which is a company now, I think it's number 2 telecom infrastructure provider, among other things. And they've got 170,000 employees. He was one of the top 12. They call these guys the 12 fellows. So he was very high up there. He was and remains one of the top scientists in the LTE space. He chaired some of the key working groups in the ITU for LTE. And so if you Google Sun Lixin, Sunlixn, and Lixin, and then follow that by either ITU or 3GPP or LTE, you'll see his name pop up everywhere. So I did a little research about him. I said, okay, so this is a guy that's been around the block. He's traveled to over 140 countries. He communicates very much like a Silicon Valley guy, albeit with less than perfect English, which is, by the way, much better than my Chinese. So we had some conversations, and after a long, hard research, I decided to make this leap. And the reason is he has a vision that he shared with me that I tend to agree with, but I haven't seen many other people communicate this specific sort of vision, because it requires some really good strategic thinking. It's not easy to see what he and I see, at least in our opinion. Maybe that's overinflated opinion of our abilities, but I'll tell you what this vision is. So Lixin sees LTE as basically, he always does this. You take a fist, one hand, and you take the Pac-Man with the other, and you eat the fist. And this, in his estimation, the open fist that's eating the closed fist, is IT eating telecom. He believes we're literally right now sitting on that inflection point where this is really finally begin to happen. You know, we've all heard buzzwords like convergence and things like this for a lot of years. A lot of that is marketing garbage, but there's a real truth to that now. And LTE, I think, is driving this mass globalization and standardization of LTE, and the driving of LTE from simply voice telecom and cellular into fixed. And he thinks that he wants to use LTE kind of as to democratize telecom, really. And so he sees it where the carriers no longer will be the driving force, but the IT companies. So he decided to leave Huawei because, as he would say, you can't turn a battleship in a bathtub. And even if they may think some similar things, they're so wedded to their current business models that it's impossible for them to be an entrepreneurial startup. So he ditched his rather considerable retirement that he had coming and launched this particular company. He's got a number of expatriates from Huawei with him. He's also got a lot of ex-Nokia guys, some Qualcomm guys, and some others over there. Total now, we're over 200 employees, only 5 of which are here in North America. It's a number that frankly kind of blew me away. But for example, I'll tell you some of the employees that he has. For example, he brought Huawei's top guy that develops for their vertical markets, right? So why would he do something like that? Well, because he believes in this vision where IT eats telecom. He thinks that we need to be working in all kinds of non-traditional spaces. So we have already got partnerships with, for example, Facebook, which is really interesting. Facebook at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, that was just a couple weeks ago actually, they launched a program they're calling the TIP, Telecom Infra Project. And this is a project that's been joined by about 27 or so charter companies, of which we're the only ones out of China that have been invited by Facebook to join. And the intent of this project is to bring broadband to underserved areas throughout the world, using, for example, things like drones and putting base stations on drones, which is something we've already shown and done. We're already doing work with, for example, Intel under LAA, License Assisted Access. And by the way, I think I can explain some point in this call why WISP shouldn't necessarily be afraid of those things. Same with LTEU. We've already demonstrated some of these things. In Mobile World Congress, we had a little tiny cell they called ELF cell, which is about the volume of an iPhone 6, serves 16 active LTE customers, and it's 2x MIMO at 50 milliwatts. And this thing is, it's tiny. It's the smallest one in the world, and Qualcomm had that in their booth under glass at Mobile World Congress. And if you know anything about that particular event, it's the biggest mobile show in the world every year. And for that week, the most expensive real estate on the planet is in the booth of one of the major telecom or IT companies. And so for Qualcomm to have this, like pheasant under glass, to have this little ELF cell under this, acrylic cube was really kind of interesting, and says something about okay.
No reason for it. Let me make sure the stream's running again, and it's BAIcells.com, right?
BAIcells.com, and
Okay.
we incorporated in Texas, and we're going to have a staffed office in the Plano area. Currently, we have our registered business agent down there, but I'll probably start commuting sometime later this year back and forth.
Fine.
Dallas,
Alrighty.
go ahead.
Yeah, not a problem. Well, we had a little audio hiccup there. I think we got it going again. So if you want to start back from where you were there, I apologize.
No worries. I'm not sure exactly where it was or where that happened.
You were talking about vertical markets and how Baicells is interested in focusing in on the IT as opposed to service provider, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. So
To paraphrase, but you were talking about, Baicells' interest in working with WISPs, which really interests me. And, I'm sure you'll work with the big telecoms if they come a knocking, but, the interest for me is you guys are interested in us.
Yeah, the North, and again, this is ground zero of the North American business, and really even the global business, right? Because if you look on our website, which admittedly needs some work, one of the missions is to connect the unconnected, and the company really does take that seriously, and I've taken that seriously the whole of my professional career, as all you guys do, when you're building out these businesses and putting your own skin in the game. But the final reason was I wanted to be at a place where I could offer these technologies at a price point that I felt could address maybe 80% of the market. I didn't think where I was before that I would be able to do that. I thought price points were too high. Not that the value isn't there for that particular piece of equipment, but I just wanted to try something a little bit differently. So here, I get the benefit of low-cost Chinese production, yet I have the mind share of some of the top LTE scientists in the world. And they wanted to make that with the experience and kind of deep market knowledge that I bring to bear, as well as the team that I brought on to help buy us some instant credibility, at least in terms of an organization or a group of people that hopefully the market will trust. As you know, I brought in Rick Harnish, who's now my director of WISP Markets, and of course, Rick led WISPA for so many years and grew that organization from about 100 member companies to over 800. And he is not what you would consider a traditional salesperson, at least he doesn't think so. But he's the turtle that over the hair that is methodical and just gets it done over time and kind of builds something. But his business values, his ethics, they're unimpeachable. And I also did the same with Boone Senecom, who, used to be one of the top guys at Double Radius for many, many years. And I've heard from a number of guys. In fact, I got a very nice email from Dave Cleveland, who runs a WISP up in Michigan, DMCI, and he told me that Boone was literally instrumental in getting him started as a business owner and helping him grow his business. So I wanted a guy like that who had a reputation for just incredible customer service. So we want to be an organization that's easy to work with. We want a product that can address 80% of the market from a price point, but at the same time, one of the corporate values is simplicity. We want to be simple to work with. We want the gear to be simple. We want to be how we communicate with the market to be simple. We want everything to be simple. A small number of part numbers. Really try to appeal to, I think, even the lowest common denominator WISP in terms of a skill set, because not everyone is a technical genius out there. And there are a lot of highly skilled WISPs, but there are still a lot of new entrants out there that aren't. And I think if you build a technology, you price it well, and you make it simple enough, which is not easy to do in LTE, because the LTE stack is, it's like the size of an old phone book. It's a lot of rules and things to build in there. So to whittle that down, where maybe you only have to set 3 to 5 things to get up and running, will be a phenomenal achievement, and that's what we're driving towards. So we have our first trials coming off what I call our Wave 2 or Phase 2 trials. These are the only ones that matter as far as I'm concerned. Anything else before was with gear that was kind of hand-built, and I'm not interested in that. So I want to test equipment that's coming off the line. So the production line is running. We expect to have shipped to us, at least it hits the ship, towards the end of this month. Probably somewhere in the area of over 100 base stations, a couple hundred CPE will hit North America really in just a few weeks. We already have prepaid trials for close to 40 people. And that sounds different, and it sounds maybe arrogant. We would ask people to prepay at least 50%. Why did we do that? We did it because we want people to have skin in the game, to be invested in their success as well as our own. But we also wanted them not to slow roll a trial. We don't have any time to waste. We've got to get up. We've got to get this stuff proven, and we also want them to follow a simple set of tests. So basically, we provided 2 trial scenarios that people could sign up for. One was to test one base station with up to 25 subscribers, so we could test scaling. Another was multiple base stations and a lower number of subscribers, so we could test sync, and then people could order, anything else that they wanted beyond that. And within each of those scenarios, we'll have a very simple list of maybe 10 things that we want people to test and provide that feedback to us. But the big carrot that we offer with this stick of asking for 50% prepayment was that we would lock in the pricing for the trial. Excuse me, that's my phone. Can let that ring, or I can go get it. It's in a different room. Is that bothering you?
Yeah, it goes bug, yeah.
So we can lock in the trial pricing for them for a period of a year. And we cut off the trial entrance. We can't accept any more, because I can't give away that much margin for that long. But we have a representation now of, we have a trial person that will be building and testing in almost every geography in the country, everywhere from Mobile, Alabama, up to Juneau, over into Arizona, all over Texas, even up into New York, all along the Appalachians, the meat of the country. So literally, almost every state. And so we think we're going to have a really good representation of how this gear will perform. What do we expect in the way of performance? Well, I've learned that there are some things that inherently make LTE a little bit better in line of sight. And the reason is because it does have a higher sensitivity at a given modulation. And in this business, to be successful in terms of non-line of sight or just maintaining a reliable connection, you need to connect everyone at the highest modulation possible. I think everyone understands that. So I'm never impressed when someone says, my gear does 256 QAM. Well, bully for you, that's wonderful. But if that only goes 50 feet, I ain't too impressed. The trick is how far can you hold modulation? So LTE does a really good job of holding modulation at range. So I'm very, very hopeful that the experience that people get in non-line of sight will be similar to what they've experienced with with my other companies' first versions of LTE. So it's a more simple box, though. It's slightly smaller in size. It's 2x MIMO, not 4x, but it is 30 dBm per port for 33 dBm aggregate. You have a max throughput gross of 110 on the downlink and about 20 on the uplink. In reality, you're probably talking about 80 megs because not everyone is in those top modulations. Probably you want to keep people at least in the QAM 16 and 3/4 and up sort of modulation. But some of the other interesting things is that's going to make us different with that, and why I believe 80% of the market will be able to access this gear is that our base stations, we're looking at price points all day, every day, and in very small quantities from our distributors of about $3,000. And there's no additional GPS. The GPS is built into the base station, although it does have an external antenna. I would never do that to anyone, to put the antenna internal. There is not an additional hardware charge for access to the EPC or the LTE core. That will be a monthly subscription of starting out at $1 per subscriber per month. That will include your EPC, that will include the management piece, and that will include the billing piece. And as well, the antenna is the only really ancillary price, and everyone knows you can get antennas pretty good. We're going to be working with largely KP, I think. There may be some alpha that we do for 65 degrees, but KP looks like they could be a very good partner for us for 90s and 120s and in those sectors. On the CPE side, one of the reasons why I think non-line of sight will be pretty good is the product that we're fielding in the marketplace is going to be principally a 19.5 dBi integrated panel. So that's a pretty high gain antenna to mate with this base station. So I think between the two, we should get some pretty considerable connections. And by the way, go ahead.
Quick question. Will that, so this is kind of an end-to-end solution, the base station and the CPE from Leary-Baicells, and this will be run via PoE, correct?
Not the base station, no. So
no, not the base station, but I mean the subscriber module.
Correct. This is just typical subscriber module using PoE and all day, every day at about $200 in low quantities, right? So we're already picking up distributors. We'll be making some announcements soon on a couple that have already signed with us. We're making the program very simple and attractive for them too, we think. We will primarily sell through a one-tier channel. I don't want to muddy the waters by doing a whole bunch of direct business, although there's always a few guys that will, although they'll have different set of requirements. But it's exciting. So they're close to, they're pretty much meeting the timelines now. From the FCC standpoint, we are in what's called the there's an old name of it, which is the PBA process, which is the permit but ask. Basically, the FCC allows now the outsourcing of the full certification process to the TCBs, which are the outsourced labs. But as I understand it, the TCB in China, they have a permit but ask process where all the documentation is compiled and delivered and then reviewed before it gets its FCC stamp. So all the correspondence is done, all the back and forth is done. Any modifications that had to be made have been done, and you got stuff rolling on the production line just waiting for the FCC stamp to go on these suckers.
Now, you had mentioned some things that are acronyms that may be standard in the LTE world, but for us novice LTE folks. So I'm just thinking out loud here. We got the base station antenna, we got subscriber module. You mentioned a bunch of other things. What are those other things you mentioned about $1 per subscriber for a service that is offered?
Right.
I imagine on top of this. What's all included here? I mean, is it a Linux box that we have to buy that you drop the software on that runs everything, or is it all cloud based? How's this work?
So the primary option is cloud-based, and thank you for making me define the acronyms. And LTE does have not a whole huge number of them, but they are different. For example, what we've all called APs, and LTE, and even WiMAX for that matter, they like to call them base stations. LTE goes a step further and calls those base stations E-Node Bs. So you'll hear E-Node Bs a lot, or just the abbreviation of a lowercase e and an uppercase N and an uppercase B. That's basically base station in LTE. On the CPE side, we use CPE because that's a specific kind of subscriber. But overall in LTE, they have what they call UEs, user equipment. Our cell phones are UEs, right? It's an LTE user equipment. A CPE is a UE. It's just a specific kind. On the what they call the enhanced packet core, which under WiMAX they used an ASN gateway. In LTE, the enhanced packet core is really what's kind of controlling. It's both controlling the network, and it's also transiting all the traffic and organizing all that back and forth. So that's a separate piece that they call an LTE, an EPC, or enhanced packet core. The trend is to do what's called a NFV, network function virtualized solution, which basically separates the control plane from the data plane, so you don't have a lot of latency and lag because the control elements or the data elements are not leaving the network. You're having to go all the way up to the cloud and come back. So the primary model for us will be a subscription-based cloud core, but we will offer software for purchase, most largely probably once people scale to a certain point, that then you could put on your own blade, your own server. We won't provide a piece of hardware most likely. Nothing terribly complicated. I think more and more people are kind of getting used to the idea, but we'll be bundling that in a piece that will include your management of the network, both base station and CP side, as well as the billing, similar to a power code and these kinds of things, which we also hope to integrate with. We still need some work on that. LTE doesn't inherently have layer 2, so that's a bolt-on that companies like ours have to add to LTE to enable that sort of thing.
So what kind of spectrum are you guys utilizing for this? I mean, what does LTE use?
Good point. So LTE, another bit of how they communicate things, they call them LTE bands. For example, what we all know as 2.5 or the EBS BRS bands, 2.5. In LTE, they call that band 41. And what we know as 2.3 WCS, they call that band 40. What we know as 365, they call that band LTE band 43. And when a band gets named, what that's saying is that the organization, the standards organization of 3GPP, 3GPP.org, you can go there and learn all about this stuff. When they assign a band name, it's basically saying, hey, these are the rules of that particular band. It's an approved band for LTE, and everyone can build to this 3GG spec, and it's all kind of baked. So there already is a band for LTE in 365. They call it band 43. Band 42 is what we'll be calling in the US the CBRS band, right? It's a 3.5 band that much of the world uses today, and we'll be using here in the US under the new CBRS rules. So we'll be building for all of those bands, 40, 41, 42, and 43. Initially, the first FCC certs come for band 43 or the 365 under the current Part 90 rules, but you can't get anything certified today under Part 90 unless that product can transition to Part 96 under the new Citizens Broadband Radio Service CBRS band. So obviously this gear will be able to do that. We've already done some work with one of the SAS developers. So 365, 2.5, also 5 gig will be coming. That's later in the year, but it will be inside of this year. We'll be doing a 5 gig spin. And there's other interesting things that we might do. And we are interested in hearing feedback from the market, because the organization has a serious interest in doing custom builds for given markets, whether that market is a vertical or for the WISP space. And we are working with some verticals already on doing some custom spins, because we can make the boards and people can integrate those into their own product as an OEM solution, or we can do it soup to nuts. One of the things we're actively thinking about, since we are so good also in LTEU and LAA, is doing a spin that might be, for example, 3.x down and 5 gig up that we develop for the WISP space. So when you start thinking that, you start talking about really phenomenal capacities, right? You're talking 20 megahertz for a down and 20 megahertz for an up. And then if you start adding things like carrier aggregation, some crazy things become possible. So these guys are really big thinkers, and they're willing to go a lot of places. My job right now is to keep them really narrowly focused on getting the first spin correct, so we don't make too many mistakes here. But those are our first bands.
So what kind of mileage, and in 5 gig, I just see line of sight, and I've got some 4G stuff myself that, that's touted as, oh, this is non-line of sight stuff. Well, not necessarily true. What's the experience with you guys in that aspect, and what range, with a setup can you see?
Well, LTE defines basically a line of sight of spec of roughly 30 kilometers at full modulation. Okay, that's what's expected under line of sight. No one can define a spec really for non-line of sight, because the only thing that we agree on when we talk about non-line of sight is that we can't see the other end. In fact, when humans discuss it, we tend to think about it from a human visual perspective, thinking non-line of sight is I literally can't see it. Non-line of sight, in truth, is more of a radio definition, where you can't see it from that end. But then there are two versions of that. You have Fresnel encroachment, or you have obstructions that are simply in the way, like an urban environment. So the only thing that we all agree on is you can't see the other end. Now, why that is, the thickness of the trees, the type of trees, whatever, that's all the big who knows until you get it up and try. But what I will tell people, and this is what I've been telling people even previously, the expectation is that if you're thinking about non-line of sight in your environment from a foliage standpoint, you should be expecting that whatever you can connect in 900, albeit at very slow speeds, you ought to be able to connect at least 80% of that using 365 and LTE, given the right antennas, right? So I'm not talking about doing that with an Omni or a low gain on the subscriber side, but I think with a good 65 or 90 sector, and with certainly our integrated 19.5 dBi subscriber, I think that kind of range expectation is really what I'm pitching out there, and it's what I hope to be seeing. And these are one of the things that obviously we're going to have people test. Truth is, right. I really don't know yet until we get this stuff up.
Another question I have is, like I said, I've got a 4G that I've been running for about 2-3 years now, and on the base station, I'm able to get coverage for 2 sectors with this base station. Is your system like that, or is it just one base station, one sector?
One base station, one sector, because it's a 2x MIMO, so it's not a 4-port.
Okay.
So it's not a 4-port or a 6-port. Not to say we couldn't do those things, but again, I'm trying to. I'll back up and do it by this analogy. Back when I was at Alvarian many years ago, I was even at BreezeCon before that. And BreezeCon was really from the technology standpoint, one of the inventors of this space.
Pioneers.
Correct. And certainly that. And when Alvarian first made a product specific for this application, for people selling commercial broadband service, the way they did it, they spent what in my opinion was too much time thinking about what was technically the best way to do it, and not what was market the best way. So we helped establish the market, did really well, And then Motorola came in and absolutely ate our lunch with the Canopy FSK product. Why? Was it the most perfect solution technically? Not by a long shot, but it was simple, it was priced right, everyone could understand it, and it did what it needed to do, including taking advantages of all the loopholes in the Part 15.247 ISM rules that allowed it to be really noisy and chew up other people. But it was a very successful product from a market standpoint. And that's what I'm trying to do here. Baicells is not interested in being the most technically superior thing. I could do that, but then I'd end up with a Bugatti. I'm looking, I'm looking at a good solid Ford Fusion or Toyota, Tacoma kind of truck thing. That's really what I'm aiming for from a value.
For us with
Dude, we all like to drive our own cars, right? We I don't like to be in the passenger seat. None of you guys like to be in the passenger seat when you're driving with someone else. So when you're putting up some new gear, if you feel like you're in the back seat and there's the windshield is blacked out and you need an engineer to remote in to tell you what's going on and how to fix it, that ain't gonna work, man. So it's got to be simple. It has got to be simple and translated down to the lowest common denominator user. That's the only way this thing takes off. And then it's got to be priced right. But there are other reasons why I want to get this stuff out there, and I want to get the market familiar with it with LTE, even outside of the traditional WISP space. And this is something I'd like to go into because I think it's going to kind of really bend the minds of your listeners. So, and if you'll allow me, I'll do that.
Go right ahead.
Okay, so I've always told people from my standpoint, it's broadband first, wireless second, the company I work for third. And if I really work hard to lift up the broadband part, the rest will kind of take care of itself. And that's always kind of how I've thought. And when I look at these technologies, sorry, that's my ice maker. When I look at these technologies, I see the same thing that Mr. Soon sees. And if you look at the CBRS band, it's a very interesting band. And I know a lot of people are...
That's the 3.5 band, right?
The new 3.5 band, the new 100 megahertz from 355 to 365, but it will be combined with the 50 megahertz up in 365. If you look at this band and what the real potential is, obviously there's huge potential for WISPs under the new rules there. But that's using what they call category B devices, right? So they actually broke up that band into category A and category B. And all of us doing outdoor wireless are mostly interested in communicating about the category B stuff, the stuff that will have to connect to the SAS, which is the Spectrum Access System, which is you can recognize kind of as the Borg. All base stations will be connected to this Borg that will manage all the spectrum pretty much in real time. That's how ultimately this new band is going to work. Well, there's another layer of equipment that we don't talk much about in this space because we don't really have visibility or either understand or think, oh, the power is too low, why would I be interested? And that's these category A side of this band. Category A is basically a lower power version of gear that does not have to talk to the SAS because it's going to be so low power. It's not at risk to interfere with the naval radars that might be existent in that space or anything like that, or the satellite guys or anything like that. So what use is that to us? Well, think of this. Most WISPs operate in their communities more than just WISP. Almost everyone is doing other kinds of services in their community, whether it's network cabling, building out networks, doing ads, moves, and changes for schools, and all that kind of stuff. I would bet probably 75% of WISPs also do some level of that kind of stuff. They have long-term relationships in their communities. think about this under the category of device. Why does anyone use Wi-Fi? Why does a hospital that has all these HIPAA requirements and everything in the medical chain that has these very strict HIPAA requirements, why do they use Wi-Fi? Well, because it's all they can use. And to that, they have to bolt all this security stuff, right? Why does any bank or anyone that doing secure transactional stuff use Wi-Fi? It's the only thing they got. Guess what? This category A stuff under the CBRS band gives the entire IT world, enterprise world, an entire new thing that they can do to basically do the same sorts of connections that they can do in Wi-Fi, but inherently much more secure. So then they can transition maybe Wi-Fi to guest use or best effort use or whatever, and they can use category A devices for all this other sort of stuff. And not only that, because it's LTE and it's part of this overall huge global ecosystem, that becomes a bridge where you could actually tie those systems into the cellular world if you wanted through your devices. So there's huge mind expanding opportunities that are going to come with this band. And that's only looking at the different levels of category A and category B. Even within category B, there's huge new opportunities for WISPs as they work with maybe. Go ahead.
You bring up a great point. I mean, is this something Baicells is looking into? This kind of thing with devices that I could go to the school and say, look, I could set you up with get rid of the Wi-Fi. That's one of the biggest contributors of problems in my neck of the woods in rural New Mexico is these schools just put up Wi-Fi access points everywhere and just pollute the spectrum. And I could go to them and say, I could provide you with something better, more secure, and then just get rid of that interference that I'm experiencing in my band.
Exactly. And everyone listening here knows that if they can pull people off Wi-Fi, it's better for them, but it's also an upsell opportunity to all your potential subscribers or all the things that they do Wi-Fi. People only use that stuff in enterprise begrudgingly because they have to. If they can accomplish the same thing with inherently much more security and 100 megahertz of virgin spectrum where there ain't nothing out there running and it's that quiet, oh my gosh. So I think.
But I mean, a lot of that depends on the consumer devices, like your laptops won't have a.
Oh, they will though.
They will.
Yeah, Apple has already committed that they'll have the 3.5. They'll support the 3.5 band. Oh. And once they, all it takes is like one of those guys. And the reason they want to commit to this stuff is look at how the category B devices will be used. In the CBRS band, it's interesting because not only are we and customers like you guys and your listeners interested for fixed wireless and rural in particular, but the mobile world is interested in that band for cellular offload in the deep urban corridors and the high population centers. Right? Why? Because their precious multi-billion-dollar spectrum is getting crushed by kids doing streaming, and or grown-ups doing streaming, like we're doing right here. So I really should have put that damn phone on silent. But in any event, so the carriers will want to use this stuff to do small cells in urban corridors, and that's only going to work if they build these radios into their phones. I mean, what's another radio? They've already got like 22 of them in your average smartphone. We don't realize there's that many radios in there, but there's a ton of them in there. So, it's nothing to add another one in there. So that's going to happen. I expect that will start happening as soon as late 2017, probably.
Back to my question, Baicells is looking at this for enterprise applications, the low power stuff. So like I said, I could go to a school and say, hey, get off of the 2.4 and you got a better solution here.
We will be building consumer level retail devices.
Sweet.
That actual UE, not CP, but other pieces of user equipment. But on the base station side, and we've already shown these in shows, and this is another reason I wanted to come here, is I don't necessarily think the grass is going to be greener over here at Baicells. There's going to be a heck of a lot more grass though, right? So not only do I have these higher power 1 watts and 10 watts, we also have 500 milliwatt base stations. Hell, we have base stations down to 50 milliwatts. So these are great even for WISPs and microcells. You talked about, what kind of range can I get in 5 gig? Well, if you're doing a one of our 500 milliwatt base stations mounted to a pole that's doing 365 down and is only expected to do maybe less than a quarter mile in distance on the up, hey, okay, maybe I can do that in 5 gig in certain areas, in town areas, or just like you use it today when you're doing, say, ubiquity microcells, which is kind of the common model. You underlay all these different microcells in there. So you have that ability to do that even with LTE, with lower powered eNode Bs, base stations. So they'll be building this entire range of base station families, and entire range of user equipment ranging from CPE down to these other sorts of things. Now this is all going to take a whole lot of time to get done, but that's where we're going, and that's where the market's going.
Is this stuff like your predecessor software-defined gear?
Ours is not. You can do that sort of stuff, and you can argue that there's technical superiority in that. I'm not bashful to say that. However, that's very expensive as well. So we think if we can offer a very solidly working, less than $3,000 base station, and that I'm talking about, that's pretty much all the cost, short of the cable and the antennas. There's nothing else in there. So you could put up a 4-sector tower inside of, with all said and done, except for maybe installation labor, about 15 grand. I think I can win some hearts and minds there with that.
So I wanted to jump back in on something very specific here that you had mentioned earlier, which is bringing in these other companies, bringing in these other these products and getting them off of Wi-Fi into another band, such as the CBRS band. Mm-hmm. One of our listeners actually kind of mentioned this as well. Isn't it just a matter of time until that band is just like the 5 gig band is now, which everybody's using it?
Potentially.
So,
but Dennis, I'm 51, and we've been using the ISM 5 gig band since before I joined BreezeCom. I was installing Wi-Fi.
Eventually, it'll get saturated.
Yeah, I mean it's 150 megahertz, and you already have the 5 gig on top of that. Absolutely, other people will use it, but it's going to take an awful long time. And the testament is, what are we doing here? We're sitting here having a Skype session with 3 video feeds coming from a laptop sitting on top of my family's little baby grand piano, and it's Wi-Fi, and we're not having any serious issues here. So, and I'm in a little, relatively urban neighborhood on small lots. So it's going to take an awful long time, I think, before that gets so crowded. Doesn't mean we won't freak out about it and worry about it, but I don't think the worry is
right away.
Is necessarily worth worrying about.
It's not right away either.
Yeah.
No, I understand.
I mean, this is the cutting edge stuff. I mean, this is why we do the show. I mean,
so you
guys want to get involved in the latest technology, That's why we do this show.
So let's talk about it. I mean, you kind of toss some pricing out, things like that. Where are we at with general availability to say, hey, Bob wants to just toss up your gear? Where are we at with that?
So I want to be aggressive, but I don't want to be stupid in how we commercially release. We want to be careful. And I have some lessons learned, and I'm not saying it was done poorly. I think maybe those of us in North America didn't always understand what we were getting into. I think I have a much better understanding of now what we're getting into. So we're going to have these very controlled trials. All of them will be managed by us directly and not through a third party. So we'll have 100% visibility into what's going on. We'll have a smaller number of them, and we'll have a very specific set of protocols that they've got to test, as well as whatever else they want to do. So we're going to get some really good visibility very, very quickly as these trials go up. In the communications I had yesterday, we know that we'll have easily over 150 base stations that we can ship into North America inside of early May, get inside in the borders inside early May. So how long does it take to get all this stuff up, shipped, installed, and tested? That we don't know 100%. I'd say
I would imagine pretty quick, because you said these people have skin in the game, and when you got skin in the game, you want to roll.
I've cashed their check, Steve. So
Yeah.
they do have skin in the game, and so I think we'll start really learning some things inside of 1 week when they get the gear up, right? And so we have to be ready for that, and we're doing everything we can to plan for that. So I'm going to be very transparent. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. I'm going to be aggressively using social media and constant contact and other tools, because I want people to feel like they're getting communicated with almost to the point where they get sick of it. One of the complaints I've always had is under communication of vendors out to the marketplace. So not only will I have specific communications to specific sets of customers, but I will have mass communications out there on Facebook, where I'll be posting customers' trial pictures. That's one of the requirements we're going to have. When you install the base station up at the tower, you snap a picture from the azimuth where the sector is installed. I want that from everyone trialing, and I will post every one of those pictures. And I'll let everyone see what kind of connection people will be getting. And we will be really open with the kimono. And
so going back to that, going back to the question, it sounds like we're still probably fourth quarter this year before general availability.
No.
I mean, you haven't even had trials yet.
We have not had we have not had production trials.
Okay, so you haven't had
off the production line.
Okay, so we haven't had production trials. So are you saying third quarter? Are you saying fourth quarter? Are you saying where are we actually? I want to have a customer go and buy your gear. When are they going to buy
gear commercially in the second quarter? It is going to happen in the second quarter.
So you're saying within 2 months you're going to be shipping?
Yes, and I'll be shipping even before. What's the date today? It says the 6th. So I'll be hopefully shipping gear to distributors inside of 2 months. The trick is if the gear performs as we expect it to do. I know there's going to be plenty of polish that we'll have to put to it, but if it's to a point where I'm satisfied and that it can be released safely commercially, in other words, people have it up and running and they see several days and there's not a burp, they don't have to babysit the thing. I already know in China, for example, the EPC that we have was running for over a month without a hiccup in China Mobile, which is the world's largest mobile carrier in their environment. So I'm feeling very confident that these guys aren't just, hey, there's some Chinese company that set up shop to manufacture this stuff. These guys know what they're doing. They're big time hitters in the LTE space. So I have a high degree of confidence that we'll get what I expect out of the performance. And as long as it's simple and it seems reliable and solid, we're going to authorize for a commercial release. And the stuff that's rolling off the production line now, I will withhold from shipping that to distributors until we decide the trial data justifies a green light. And once that green light is go, the stuff will be ready to hit the boat. So I'll be in full production quantities we can get to inside of even May for the 365 stuff, nothing else, 365 stuff. So absolutely second quarter. If we can't get it done in second quarter, then it's because something, critical weakness in the performance. That's the only thing that's going to keep that from happening.
So Patrick, one other technical question. Like I said, I've got a 4G system, and I'm just looking at the gear. I got the base stations, 4 base stations I need from you, the antennas. I need to provide the area with a bandwidth pipe to break it out for the LTE. Is that just basically it? A public IP address to your gear, and then we're off and running because everything's cloud-based, and it's that simple?
It's supposed to be that simple.
Okay.
We'll all find out soon enough, right? And like I said, it's supposed to be that simple. I'm expecting that level of simplicity. I need our team to prove that out, right? To all our satisfactions, to your satisfaction.
Well, how long has Baicells been around? I know that you've got the
About
experience
2 years.
Two
About 2
years,
years.
and you're talking trials in the United States. This stuff's been trialed and working in other countries, like you mentioned, China, right?
A lot of work on the R&D front first.
Right.
So, but yes, they have been type approved for China Mobile, which that was also very important in my decision because if I thought that they were just starting from scratch, no way I would do it. I have a huge number I have to hit, and if I don't hit it, then things get ugly. So, but they know that they have certain things that they have to do to enable me to hit it. If the gear works as expected, I don't think we're going to have any problems. I think we're going to crush expectations, and I
Good.
think we're going to make a lot of people very, very uncomfortable because our CPE, I already know, will communicate. It's going to be more basically standard than other models out there. So people will be able to use our CPE for other brand base stations. I think that's going to be very problematic
Yes.
for some folks. We're going to try to be flexible with people, even being able to attach to other people's cores if we can make that happen. There's a lot of work to be done for that stuff. IoT is interoperability testing is a really complex matter, but maybe I'm just overly optimistic, but I'm pretty hopeful here.
Well, we're getting close to our hour for the show. What I'd like to offer you is to come back to us once you get the trials done and tell us how those went, and see where we're at in production. So maybe we could get our hands on this gear and go out and do that. But if you have any more to tell us, I think you've explained what Baicells is all about and how they're entering the North American market by hiring you, which is probably a very smart thing.
So I would say let's get back mid-trial. Let's not wait till the end of the trial. Let's do a progress report.
Sure.
And let's see if I'm red in the face, either out of anger or frustration, or if I'm happy. So I would like to do that. So, and we'll be
Sure.
open about it and see where we're at.
Absolutely, and we'll schedule that up. So, Dennis, you got any other questions? I think we talked about Baicells, and it sounds like a interesting product. Can't wait to
find and follow us on
works.
Facebook. We'll post all the information. We'll keep everything fresh on there. Just simple Facebook. Just hunt for Baicells. BAICELLS.
Perfect. Thank you, Patrick. Dennis, any other questions?
Yeah, the last thing I got is probably pretty simple. Obviously, I want to make sure I point this out to all of our listeners that are listening. And Patrick, please correct me if I'm wrong on these items, but it sounds like I think I got these down. The very first one is Baicells. You guys are in trial. You have all the gear coming in. It is not physically at all these trial locations, but that should be within very, very short order. You're hoping to have all those trials done in about 2 months, and then hopefully within those 2 months, you're going to have the product released. So right now, there's not a number that people can call and order stuff yet because you're not there. And you're not offering or you're not allowing any more trials. You have enough trials. You're good on that. So really, it's just a waiting game for those of you that are interested in the Baicells product. We are waiting for the trials to get complete to verify that all is good, and then once that happens, I'm sure there'll be a big product announcement, a little disco tech thing somewhere, probably in Dallas, I'm assuming, or maybe your house, Patrick.
It's not large enough. But,
yeah, a little party
at the beach by my house.
There you go. But I'm sure they'll say, hey, we're releasing it to the public. Anybody that wants to buy it, they can get it. And hopefully, currently you're looking at still second quarter of this year to have that product released, which is always good. Good to know that we have a date or time frame in mind. So,
believe it or not, I'm already taking orders. We are taking orders, and we're just putting the contingency of, certain expectations with product performance. But I've already got a pretty good number of orders in.
So maybe this would be to wrap up the show here. Who should they contact to get these orders done? If they are interested in pre-ordering the product prior to its release?
I think it's the easiest way to just, instead of a phone number, people can just go to, I think if they click on the Baicells website, there's a little robot guy there, and that'll take you to a U.S. link. I think it's na_sales@Baicells.com or sales_na. I'm sorry, it's one of those two. I apologize for not getting that right. Or they can certainly email me at patrick.leary@Baicells.com, and I'll forward them, either answer them personally or forward them to Rick or Boone, depending on the situation.
I think what Patrick really mentioned is it sounds like they're aggressively using Facebook. So, I mean, we can all follow their progress through that, and I'm sure that they'll keep us up to date. But a mid-trial show would be real beneficial, I think.
Yeah, and then I could put a lot of pictures and everything else up there, hopefully. So.
Yeah,
exactly.
Excellent.
All right, guys, I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being on the show. When I got the news that you quit your last place and started with this, I reached out, be on the show. But anyways, great show. Thank you for being on the show. And Dennis, if you'll wrap us up, we will talk to you all guys all next week. Dennis, who do we got on for next week? Just check real quick.
Yeah, you're asking me these things here. Let me check it out here. Of course, it's on our website. Actually, it's not on our website. We have Ciclu on the 20th, but I don't see if we put up anything for next week, so we might need to check on that. But we will, of course, announce that as we get that information. We'll put that on the lists and such as we go for a ride with Patrick there. So with that said, you ready to anything else, Stephen? We'll wrap her up.
No, wrap her up. Got to get going.
Excellent.
Thank you for listening to ISP Radio. We hope you've gained new insights and additional wisdom in our industry as well as your business. Please remember to visit our show sponsors via the links on ispradio.com. If you're interested in becoming a show sponsor, contact us at sales@ispradio.com. Now go out there and push those packets as fast as you can. Good luck and Godspeed.